This is a Strategist, episode 1852. My name is Zain Velji. With me, as always, Corey Hogan. And of course, there is the traveling salesman, Stephen Carter. Where do we find you, Carter?
Today I am in a hovel, I believe. It is a different type of room than I've been in the past. Same hotel.
Yeah.
Very different living accommodation.
So can I tell you something? Yeah, go ahead, Corey. And then I've got a very keen observation, but please, you first.
Yeah, gray, unfurnished wall, microwave prominently displayed in set.
They're firing you from this campaign. The room quality going down from where it was last time, which was I'm gonna say within meters of your local fire and paramedic service, to where it is now, which is they have boxed you in. You are this is on the path to being out, Carter. We've seen this before.
No. I've got their. They said to me just yesterday, they've got 100% confidence in me.
Okay.
What's this?
Good. That's good.
Yeah, it feels good.
Carter, your room has no windows. Your room has no windows.
It's true. I'm in a room with no windows.
Corey, have you ever gotten a hotel room with no windows?
No.
Is that even
the
legal?
time we went to Ottawa and we forgot to book a hotel room. Was that Zain or you who had to sleep on the...
That was not... No. Different. I did have a really bad hotel room in Ottawa where we forgot to book. That is true.
Forgot to book, or you thought you'd get super lucky booking last minute?
It was a last minute thing, and then I booked. I can't remember, but I ended up at this it was clearly not originally a hotel, and I think if there was a window there, it was probably looking into like an interior courtyard that was also without windows.
Carter, not only do I think they want you off the campaign, I think they don't want your remains to be found. Okay, that's what this hotel indicates to me, is that it's like, oh, it would be unfortunate if there were a fire and no way out because there's no windows in
I got quoted in an article again.
I saw that.
The end of it.
Yeah.
Wait, can we talk about this? I have not seen this.
Yeah, he just said they should just look at the rules and be creative. I think that was your quote, right?
That was my quote. That's a good quote.
What was your... Okay, can you give us some context? I'm giving you some free airtime to pump up the fact that you've been quoted somewhere.
We did so Vancouver Sun and the Globe and Mail both interviewed me about we did a negative option sign thing because no one answers their telephones anymore, kids. And so we did that, and I'll tell you, chaos ensued.
A lot of signs.
Sorry, so tell me what this is. Can you just explain this to me? What is this negative? What did you do?
You know what it is.
You remember the old days
what it is.
When corporations used to do this to you. They'd say, if we don't hear from you, we're going to increase your rates, right? Or we're going to sell you this new product. And I think of Rogers and, the cable companies were notorious for this. Anyways, that was called negative option billing. And in sign land, what it basically is I send you a series of emails that say, by the end, if you don't opt out, we're going to install a sign on your lawn.
What? I love this because I love this for you. Sorry, let me rephrase. I love this for you because it's so you. It's so you.
Of course it is.
Yo, what? Has anyone done this before?
Well, it's been done before.
Okay. And how did it go? I'm actually beyond the quotes and the media. What was the goal of it, and how did it go?
Well, we had about 2.5% rejection rate early, with people emailing back saying don't give me the sign. And then we had about a 0.1% rejection once we installed.
So wait, you installed signs on what, hundreds of lawns and just like assuming consent?
2,000.
Oh my God. Corey, you're closing your eyes and shaking your head. Is this the fact that I'm talking about this or the fact that you object to the strategy?
It's the actual strategy. It makes me sad.
Yeah, but didn't I summarize it correctly? I love this for you, Carter.
95% of the people.
I love this for you.
We had a list of 2,000 signs. Do you know how hard it is to contact 2,000 people?
Okay. So I need some context here. These are 2,000 people who in the past had taken a sign.
They have taken a sign in the past.
Okay, I'm less offended.
Yeah. Okay. Actually, that's a little better.
Yeah. They'd taken a sign 2.5 years ago for the election. So we were contacting people who had already had a sign. It wasn't like I was just
now you got
to your house, knocking your door, and it's like,
but
you're not home, so I'm installing a sign.
But now you got to be impressed with that conversion rate to be able to increase the pool a bit for you.
Oh yeah, I mean, fuck it. I put out another 1,000 this weekend. No one knows about that yet.
So you were quoted in the Globe. You were quoted in the Globe about this,
The Globe
because people
and the Vancouver Sun.
Because people were kicking up a storm.
Yeah, I said that they were politically challenged. The people who were opposing this idea.
How did I miss this?
Challenged.
How did I miss this?
I don't know, but I'm kind of a big deal out here in Vancouver now.
And now you're in a room without windows in a building that will more than likely.
100% full confidence.
Okay, good. I'm glad that's the situation with you, Corey. Now I don't see any windows present in your home.
Yeah,
but I suspect there are. Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you for confirmation. Yeah, that people in your home want you to live. You're doing well otherwise?
I am. Yeah. I got to hear this story that Stephen had. It made me feel better about the choices I made in my life that led me here as opposed to wherever he is, whatever bunker he's broadcasting from.
100% full confidence.
It's good. Let's move it on, gents. Let's move it on to our first and perhaps our only segment, choices for Mr. Mark Carney. Let's talk about choices in 3 different ways. First, I want to talk about the choices that Mr. Carney made. Prime Minister Carney, we're going to have to get used to that. Indeed, that is what it is. Prime Minister Carney made for his cabinet. I then want to talk about, gents, the choices he made to message that cabinet and that initial sort of round of press coverage that he did, because I think there's some strategist questions in there. And then let's spend the final third of the show talking about the choices in front of him for what he does next. And I really want to focus on the unique sort of angle and the unique sort of things we could bring to the table, talking about message, brand, how he should position day one, etc. He's launched 6 weeks ago. Does he need to launch again? Or 2 months ago? Does he need to do another launch card? Stuff like that I want to talk about in the third segment. But let's talk about choices round one. Corey, I'll start with you. Some surprising choices. Smaller cabinet was projected. It is smaller, but it's not tiny. A different cabinet was projected. It is different-ish, but it's of the same players, no outside players. And some key omissions, so to speak. What did you make of the first choice that Mark Carney had in front of him, which was his cabinet?
I guess I was surprised by how conservative it was, like small c conservative, not radical in any way, shape, or form. Probably the most noteworthy thing was the size, which, but for a little blip somewhere in the aughts, is the smallest cabinet since the 80s, I believe. That means something, maybe even the 70s. And it does talk about a different type of leadership and a different type of governance. Presumably, the cabinet ministers, when there's fewer of them, will have more power. I think that that's a good thing. I've certainly been critical of people who've gone the other way and made everybody a fucking critic or a cabinet minister. So I have no real qualms with this. I think it's fine. But the idea that you would just go and pick from your existing caucus, mostly your existing cabinet, and almost exclusively people who supported you in the leadership, tells me in some ways this was the most traditional cabinet making we've seen in a long time. Like, didn't seem that fussed with gender equity, although most of the powerful ministers are women. Didn't seem that fussed with, regional balance. And I'm sure we'll get into that because Alberta, of course, got a big goose egg on the board there. And in that way, I think it was quite a traditional cabinet, right? In fact, it's a cabinet that
Old
looks
school,
a lot more
almost
like cabinets in the 60s and 70s than it does in the aughts and teens.
Carter, there's many sub-choices that we can talk about, and choice is going to be my whole framing of this episode. But what did you make of the overall choice? And then let's get into some of the questions that I think are interesting around some of the sub-choices that he made: regionality, specific people, gender, etc. What do you make of the overall composition?
I mean, aside from the obvious exclusion of Corey Hogan,
was weird.
No, I'm disappointed by this cabinet, to be honest. I am disappointed by the cabinet. I'm disappointed that George Chahal wasn't in the cabinet. I'm disappointed that there wasn't a bunch of new blood brought into the cabinet. I think that had more to do with the rush of becoming a cabinet and naming a cabinet as soon as possible. That to me was the driving consideration of the cabinet, was how do we get the cabinet ministers in as quickly as possible, and not how do we get the best possible cabinet for the election. So I'm disappointed. I think that regional balance, forget about regional balance. Let's talk instead about making sure that we have regional competitiveness. There's a very real chance that you don't have any Liberal seats from Alberta in the next election. I'd be wanting to shore that up. And I'm just disappointed because I think that the answer was, let's put this in as quickly as possible. That means that we don't have a lot of time for vetting. So we're going to go with the people who are already on the vetted list.
Yeah. That was certainly the sense I got too, right? Like I suspect they, just even based on the reporting and some of the musings that were out there, that maybe at least for a hot minute, they considered doing something different with the cabinet, maybe even pulling people in from outside of the cabinet. Certainly we saw some reporting on that, but then ultimately decided, it's not really going to work for us, and probably came down for logistical concerns, as these things often do, to be frank. But that's kind of the heart of this is a very conservative cabinet point, right? They said that might be a little difficult, so let's do the thing that's not particularly difficult. And I don't know. I mean, that tells us something about Mark Carney. It shouldn't be surprising. He's a former central banker. But if you're a Liberal thinking he's going to throw out like absolutely everything that's ever been done and do an entirely new type of politics, I suspect you're going to be disappointed. His new will likely be what politics looked like 40 years ago. And maybe that will be refreshing to us after the last couple of decades of, soundbite politics, but it's not going to be revolutionary.
Corey, why do you think George Chahal was not in the cabinet? First caucus member to endorse him. Launch happened in his quote unquote like jurisdiction of Alberta. Gave the opening speech to him, but here he is, not in cabinet. Surprised me. Did it surprise you?
It did surprise me. It seemed like it'd be a pretty easy addition to make, but there may have been other considerations. They may have worried about the caucus dynamics that would introduce, given that George had been one of the people who'd been critical of Justin Trudeau earlier than everybody else. And so maybe there was a group of Trudeau loyalists who thought that would just be absolutely a no-go for them. Maybe there was a challenge with vetting, either time or they found something that warranted further conversation. I'm not saying there was. In fact, I doubt it in terms of like the vetting, like further thing, but that's always a possibility with these things. You got to think about Andrew Leslie, for example. Everyone thought he'd be in cabinet. We don't know why he wasn't, but certainly the rumors for a long time have been there was something. And when you do these things, there's never any that's like, therefore they cannot be in cabinet, but often this causes us concern. We'd want you to kind of self-report this, whatever it may be, right? Maybe there were some hiccups there. And, maybe it was just decided that it just wasn't worth the pain in terms of dealing with those considerations. That's my guess, right? I don't think that there's been a falling out between Carney and Chahal. That, to me, seems unlikely. This might be the catalyst for one, but I don't think that there was anything that changed, Mark Carney's thinking of George Chahal in the leadership contest.
Carter, it was very much a cabinet of people who helped me get here, yet George Chahal's not on the list. What's going on?
I don't know. I think that it was all about vetting. I really do. I think that, and I don't think it was about vetting turning something up. I think it was, we're doing this 4 days from now. How are we going to make sure that we get the right possible cabinet? Oh, okay, well, we'll just take the existing cabinet, add a couple, and call it a day.
Well, and those couple may have been vetted in the round last time, right? That's the thing you've got to keep in mind. New faces may have been previously vetted when Justin Trudeau was thinking about his cabinet back last summer. Or summer before.
Yeah, so there was probably a list of people that they could reach from. They reached from that list, and they dramatically shrunk the cabinet in part to say, this is a smaller cabinet, so not everybody's going to be in it, but just you wait, it'll be okay after the election when we name our actual governing cabinet. This is just an election cabinet. Don't worry about it. It's not actually sending any real messages to the population or anything like that.
Yeah, no, in order to get that joke, you can tune into our completely well-aged Patreon episode. That aged perfectly.
Do you know what? That held up okay. I think in the final summary, you're not going to hate it.
Yeah, no,
that's a guarantee.
Okay, well, that's a Corey Hogan guarantee. Hey, listen, let's keep talking about other choices. Carter, strategic mistake not to have anyone, was it west of something, like west of some Ontario place? Like no one in Manitoba. We can even do the math ourselves. No one in Manitoba.
No Manitoba.
No Saskatchewan. No Alberta.
No Alberta.
Any BC?
One BC.
One in BC.
I can't remember who it was.
Okay. So one from those 4 provinces, is that a strategic mistake, or do you in your heart of hearts not give a shit?
No, it's a big mistake. I mean, for me, this thing is all going to boil down to the lower mainland of British Columbia. I mean, let's say you pick up a couple seats in Saskatchewan or a couple seats in Alberta. That's great. That's all wonderful. Isn't that exciting? We picked up 2 more seats. But the lower mainland of British Columbia is ripe for, going conservative. It's also ripe for going liberal. I mean, it's going to be an absolute battleground in the next election. And why you wouldn't want to buttress against the coming force of conservatism by putting in just a couple of cabinet ministers. Again, if it only gives you a 2-point bounce for that individual cabinet minister, that 2-point bounce could make a massive difference. Plus, you have things that you can actually do. I mean, it doesn't look like this cabinet's actually going to be announcing anything or doing very much. It's all going to come from the Prime Minister's office for the next week. But nonetheless, it still would have been very helpful, I think, to have had at least 2 or 3 more cabinet ministers west of the Ontario-Manitoba border.
Corey, strategic mistake, or you don't really give a crap that we don't have coverage for those 3 provinces? Real politic.
I don't think it's like a fatal mistake, but I do think it is part of a worldview that is outdated, right? The west of this country, in terms of size, population-wise, economy, it's shifted big time. Like BC and Alberta, there's more people in these 2 provinces than there are in Quebec, right? The dynamics of this country have shifted. And you just have to turn on CBC The National to get that the Laurentians don't always understand that, right? That's a reality. I'm going to put on my aggrieved Alberta hat for a minute here, but it's true. You do not always get that recognition that the balance of the country has shifted west. And it is consistent with a cabinet that was built like it was in the 60s and the 70s. That's about all I can say for it in a neutral sense. It doesn't make sense to me you wouldn't give at least some consideration to regions, especially when you consider how titchy these regions are, right? We don't like to be forgotten. We're well aware we're regularly forgotten. And so it's not doing the Liberals any favors. But it is a 50-day contract. But there were challenges with the, putting in some of the Alberta people potentially. And so I guess it is what it is, right? And Mark Carney ultimately decided he wanted a cabinet that he could trust to do no harm. Seems to be the mantra here. And for whatever reason, he decided some of the other choices might harm him.
I want to talk about the other 2 pillars of choices shortly. So, Carter, I'm going to go quickly on this. The choice of giving Guilbeault an upgrade, as you have, and also the change in heritage, which I think is interesting, like the Ministry of Heritage now to cultural identity. Can we talk about that for a second? The strategy there on both fronts, the change in the nomenclature, as well as taking environment away from Guilbeault, but making him your Quebec lieutenant for reasons I think are pretty apparent in terms of his popularity in Quebec still being quite strong. What do you think of that? I don't want to go through everyone. Guilbeault is an interesting one to me.
Well, Guilbeault is interesting, but keep in mind that Champagne and Joly also endorsed Mark Carney, right? Like there is a
sure, and he gets finance and she keeps foreign affairs, just for people to keeping score at home.
But there's a significant Quebec contingent. Now, in fairness, Quebec is going to, if the Liberals are going to form anything vaguely resembling a government, Quebec and Ontario are going to have to go Liberal. But so does the lower mainland of British Columbia. Anyways, and I'm not sure that Guilbeault got an upgrade to Quebec.
I was going to say,
he was fairly
that does not feel like
very
a promotion
significant.
To me.
Tell me why.
Environmental.
Tell me why.
Yeah,
look, I mean,
because the environment you actually do shit. In heritage, you just
exactly.
It was heritage he got, right? Like you just
heritage relabeled to cultural identity. Yeah, that's right.
A couple of other things.
Yeah, lay it on me, Corey.
To it as well. But look, I think here's the reality. There's going to be a lieutenant for each of these provinces. Lieutenants that's not a cabinet position, right? That's saying like, oh, you're my guy or you're my gal, right? For this very very particular geography here. And I think it's a bit of a lame consolation prize, frankly. The spin, the spin goes the other way, Zain. Like the Quebec journalists, when I was watching the Carney presser, were saying like, "Hey, what's going on? He's back to where he was basically." Like Guilbeault is
no, I agree with that personally. Like,
quote unquote demoted, and Mark Carney said, "Oh no, this is so important. The identity of this country is very tied up into these current conversations we're having." And I agree with that. It is like it's probably never been in the past 30 years a more important portfolio, right? Probably Sheila Copps was the last time a heritage minister actually was considered like important. But it is spin. It is ultimately not as good of a portfolio as environment. And it's certainly when you consider that his thing, well, yeah, he wasn't the one who introduced it, but he was such a champion of the carbon tax. And that was also pulled out. I don't know how you read that as a promotion. I don't think it is.
Yeah. Carter, let's talk about the final choice I want to discuss in cabinet. The choice for the Conservatives in front of them. They, on the day of, talked about this being 90 some odd % the same people that Justin Trudeau had in his cabinets. The question I have is less about message, more about longevity. How long do the Conservatives talk about this cabinet? Was it just to respond to the news cycle that Carney gave them on that day last week? Or do they talk about this cabinet and use their time and energy to talk about this cabinet going forward? Where are you with that from a strategic point of view?
If they talk about this cabinet going forward, they're going to lose. This is not going to be an election about the cabinet choices that Mark Carney's made. This is going to be an election about Mark Carney and his character and capabilities versus Pierre Poilievre and his character and his capabilities. And that is the actual election. And I think that you need to remind people that Pierre Poilievre was going to be the prime minister and still should be the prime minister if you're the Conservatives, because the Liberals, and it's not, they haven't changed much in the cabinet. It's that they haven't changed much in their leader. So this should be about the leader, not about the cabinet in my mind. But Jenny Byrne and Pierre Poilievre, they only know one mechanism, and that's attack everything. So I wouldn't be surprised if they still went after the cabinet. But I think that's a huge mistake, going after a group of people that, most Canadians won't be able to name more than two.
Corey, Carter might be right about Canadians being able to name it, but is it compelling that they talk about the 90 some odd % of cabinet being Justin Trudeau's crew going forward, or was that just a competent response on the day of, in your mind?
I'm sure it'll come up again. I think it's just another proof point in their whole just like Justin attack that they've been doing for, I don't know, the past month even before he was officially leader. Certainly running those ads in volume if you're listening to terrestrial radio, or if you're
and billboards and out of home and everything.
Yeah, I mean, I was driving around Calgary.
You saw tax relief.
Couple of yeah. There's just a lot out there.
Yeah.
Like it's a pretty saturated market for advertising, and I don't know, carbon tax Carney, just like Justin, they're going with those alliterations.
They got money to spend.
And they're going to run them hard.
They're spending it.
But Corey, do you think there's a there on talking about cabinet going forward? Of course it'll come up, but
yeah, so,
should they talk about it?
But as I was saying, Carter's right. Like, you don't want to be talking about the cabinet. And how would that, even if the cabinet became the conversation, we got to talk about his cabinet. We got to talk about the people around him. We got to talk about his team. Who's your cabinet, Pierre? Like, can we talk about your cabinet? Can we talk about your team? What would you do? Like, it's not going to happen because it's not going to happen. But if you were somehow going to make the cabinet and the team the conversation of the election, I just don't know that that's to your advantage if you're Pierre Poilievre. His advantage is to make it singularly about one man, Justin Trudeau. So the cabinet individuals they're not individuals. They're just a mass of humanity that is roughly the same as Justin Trudeau. And that's the only thing he cares about. And that's as far as they're going to go with the attack.
Let's talk about the second pillar of choices, which is Carney's messaging and his immediate sort of in front of him tasks. And I guess the main question I have in front of you to grapple with, guys, is does Carney want to do more from this job than just call an election? This might be the only sort of 2-week window in which Carney gets to be prime minister. And is there anything that, in your mind, Carter, that's strategic of Carney wanting to do more of the job than perhaps we might expect him to do before calling an election? Does that question make sense? Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Like, he could get into it and be like, fuck, there's shit I want to do here. And yeah, it might be later this week or next week that he calls an election, but how much governing, the choice of governing, how much do you think Mark Carney will have an appetite for? And how would you kind of pull someone back from that, especially when they may have a particular appetite for it.
I mean, less than zero. I think that in general, like the trip to Europe, we talked about that a few weeks ago. The thing, how that made sense.
You predicted that, and you said that was a good idea, and I want to call that out.
Because you go to Europe, you remind the world that we have opportunities beyond that of the United States. You come back, you take some sort of action against Trump. That's about it, because you're not actually governing. You're setting up your election. You're just doing enough to prove that you belong on the world stage. Pierre doesn't. You're doing enough to prove that you can act against Donald Trump. Pierre can't. You're doing enough to show that you have a government of people that can actually do the job, and Pierre doesn't. That's it. That's all you have to do. So you have to get in and you have to get out as quickly as possible. And I think the election is going to be called in like extremely short order.
Yeah.
So, get in, get out, and don't worry about governing.
Corey, should he worry at all about governing? And of course, we'll talk about the repealing of the consumer-facing carbon tax in a moment here. But beyond that, should he care at all about any governance matters while he's prime minister, and perhaps while the only time he's ever prime minister?
I think that there's a few Canadian equivalent of executive orders he's got to do, right? Maybe not even OICs. Like, he's playing a bit fast and loose with holding up signs that say, like, I dictate that this is going to
right, that one paragraph works, carbon tax repeal sort of
not
thing.
Not really how our government works. It's fine.
Yeah,
but
it was made for good theater.
Yeah, well, that's it. He's going to bring the theater to the next couple of days here to make a big show of using government to make changes to unpopular policies, to make a big show of using the fact that he's the prime minister to go meet with leaders and reinforce people's perception of his relationships. That's it. He's not sitting there saying, if I had an extra week, I really think I could knuckle into those regulations about health.
I guess, okay, you're right. So maybe a different way for me to ask my question is, does he want to show action, not do things? Does he want to show action in his 2 weeks or 1 week, 10 days? I'm going to just use 10 days as a placeholder for governing. Does he want to show action? And is that actually an important part of the setup for the third pillar that we're going to discuss, which is the choices he needs to make in week one of a campaign?
Yeah, of course. So we already saw a little bit of that on Friday, where he went and he made a couple of moves as the new prime minister. If you ever wanted any evidence, light though it may be, that the cabinet was not really about the cabinet, but it was about just saying there's a new boss in town, it's that he repealed the carbon tax the exact same day. You could have easily spaced that out another day, said, we're meeting today, but we're going to meet again tomorrow. We've got some important things. It's all orientation today. Tomorrow is when we get down to the real agenda. Like, you have that option, right? But he said, no, I'm gonna repeal the carbon tax today. He's now going to Europe. He was marching in a St. Patrick's Day parade. He's gonna do a few things that showcase him in different ways, using the power of his office. And then he's fucking out. Like, of course. Like, nothing I've seen so far makes me think he actually is interested in governing, right? Like,
and you both would think it's a mistake that he would get deeper than where he is right now.
Well, Christ, you're never going to get anything done in the time he's got available.
Yeah.
Nothing real.
What are you going to do? Rethink healthcare?
Carter, let's move on then.
Okay.
The choice of his presser. What did you think of it? The human wall behind, very conventional, right? Step outside, the human wall of his cabinet ministers, Chrysler Freeland over right shoulder. So talk to me about the visuals of it, and then talk to me about what you thought of those 20-25 minutes where he gave a bit of a speech and then answered questions from the press. So I'll ask both of you about the choices that were made there, both strategic and messaging wise.
Yeah, I mean, I think that he looks and sounds like a prime minister. This is where I'm going to kind of agree with Corey's earlier assessment about the cabinet. It's traditional, right? Like, I don't think that they made there were no decisions there that were outside of the norm. This was exactly the norm, and I think that might be one of the theories of the election is we just need normalcy again, right? And I would argue that he needs to step out a little bit more.
What do you mean by that? What does that mean?
I'd like to see him on his own. This trip to Europe is going to be super interesting. How does he look without a human wall? How does he look, when he's, can he take questions on a topic that he's not 100% an expert on already? Can he survive without his cabinet ministers? It's going to be an interesting trip to Europe.
Corey, what did you think of the setup? What did you think of the content?
I think Carter named it so squarely and so well. It was normalcy, right? Like it was central casting for Prime Minister. What is it supposed to look like in our mind? Maybe even in a way it doesn't even usually look like, but it's what you expect, right? And
Yeah.
he did that job really well. A couple other comments I'll add. One is I've never seen a guy the first day on the job look more comfortable. And I don't mean a politician. I mean anyone. Like he looked like he'd been doing it for months, didn't have a care in the world, was batting around. Like there was no bleeding of nervousness there. He looked like a guy who'd had the job forever, right? And I think that that's an incredible superpower he's got. He's clearly got a lot of confidence. Doesn't
Believes
seem
in
to be
himself.
irrational
Yeah,
confidence.
no, for sure.
Yeah. And he's just fine with it, right? He's instantly fine with it. I also think he's better off the cuff than off the script. Like his remarks were delivered
Yeah.
very plodding, marching through, certainly something we identified during the leadership contest as well. But the minute it's, okay, let's go to questions, he's boom, bam, ping. He's throwing little quips out. He's joking with journalists. He's just moving through it.
Kind of a prick to journalists, but yes, a little bit. But yes.
So on that note, I got to tell you, he was just the right level of prick for day one. He can get away with that day one. If that was day 1,000, people would be like, fucking what an asshole, right? But on day one...
So you saw it too?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
But on day one, you can get away with that.
I like this guy, but I've seen this guy before, and he may not be the easiest to work with sort of guy. Like we've met a person like this before. I'm not saying you, the three of us, but like we've seen versions of this person.
Oh no,
before.
I'm well aware I can be that guy on moments.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I think it was interesting, but I like Carter also would have liked to see, maybe this is their theory of the campaign. We're going to be central casting for the Prime Minister, but I would like to see some creativity myself. We'll see, could come.
Well, I want to talk about potential creativity. In a second. Carter, there is the item of the choices that he made, which is the day one carbon tax repeal.
Yeah.
Did you like, and everything from, including aspects of which we've already touched on, the cameras in the cabinet room, the signing of the executive order. The only thing that was missing was the fucking Sharpie, so that it wasn't Trump-like, right? It was, but the theatrics and the actual timing. Would you have done something differently? How would you have made it better? I guess let me start with that angle in getting your strategist assessment with it.
Well, I don't think that I would have done it the same day as the cabinet.
Why?
Because when Alison Redford was running for the leadership and we went into that 2-week period, every other leadership contender endorsed Gary Moore, all on the exact same day, and you didn't get to build the story. And the building of the story is what actually allows a story to become something more exciting. Name your cabinet on Friday. Make an announcement on Saturday. Make another announcement on Sunday. Go to Europe on Monday, right? So your announcement on Saturday could have been the repeal of the carbon. We're working 24/7 here. We're going to repeal the carbon tax on Saturday. It's as big a news day because now you get the cabinet story and the carbon tax story and the Europe story, and you're building instead of trying to fight your own story. And if you think that the media has the capacity of doing more than one story, it's super duper hard for the media to do more than one story, especially when they're doing reactions to, they got to go to Pierre Poilievre and get his reaction. They got to go to some guy who runs the NDP. Does anybody remember his name? I don't remember.
No. I don't think there is an NDP anymore, Stephen.
I think it's
you're
gone.
confused.
Yeah, I was confused. That's on me. I apologize. But this would have given them the more opportunity to build momentum, right? Cabinet. I think if you went cabinet, carbon tax, trip to Europe, come back from Europe, action on the United States. That would be my recipe board.
Corey, let's talk about this. What did you like? What did you not like about the carbon tax repeal announcement? The timing of it, the theatrics of it. And I'm curious if you feel like it hit their day one goal, which is seriousness. Like we're going to do shit or show action. I'm curious what you kind of took away from that day as well.
Yeah. So what I liked the theatrics. I know you've got some people online, including conservative MPs, saying this is ridiculous. This is not how the system works. I thought it was fine. Look, it is kind of how the system works. The prime minister directs a minister to do something and the minister does it. We just don't have I was really curious. Does that template exist? Did they just use a standard cabinet template and use it in a different way? Or did somebody have the job of saying, okay, we're basically creating an order from the prime minister. Can you go put that on paper that looks like it came from the cabinet?
Because we're going to post it on social media afterwards, by the way.
I'm so curious about the specifics behind the scenes there that got that going on. But that was all working for me. That was good. That was something that...
and it was definitive and clear and short. And
clear, short, and you're winning when your opponent is sitting there and saying, that's not how we eliminate, like anybody gives a fuck, right? Like anybody gives a fuck. And the funny thing is, as I already said, it is kind of how we do it. We just don't do it in that template, right?
We don't just do it in the way that Trump has kind of done it on a weekly basis. It's time for my office hours of executive order sort of thing.
Yeah, so I don't think it was fully dishonest. I do wonder about it being the same day. It's not unusual for that to happen. I think Jason Kenney did the exact same thing, got sworn in, repealed the carbon tax that afternoon at the cabinet meeting, right? But I do think that the challenge with it is, I do think the challenge with it is you are stepping on your own story and you are assuming that everybody wants to have the zone as flooded as badly as you do. And my own personal feeling about Saturday is it was a lost day for the Liberals. It was the day after and there didn't seem to be a great plan for it. And absent a great plan, I don't know why that wasn't the plan. If you had something else to keep everybody spinning on Saturday and on Sunday before the Monday trip, go for it. But if you didn't, why didn't you spread that out a little bit more?
Yeah. Corey, I want to talk about this third pillar of choices, and let's spend a bit of time on this. Let me start with a big question that you've alluded to, but not explicitly as a discussion point, and I want to make it one. The data we have is limited. It's Friday to now. But is Carney presenting himself as too conservative to be able to win this next election in your mind?
No. Okay. So listen.
Let's start there.
I'm basing this on one very simple piece of data. Where has where has the Liberal gains come from? Where have they come from?
You mean historically?
No, I mean in the past 2 months.
This last week.
The NDP. The
NDP
you want to fill
the
at 11 or 12%, right?
Where they've been historically at the 20s, right?
They've dropped 8 points.
Yeah.
And those points have all gone to the Liberals as they've gotten more right wing, as they've gotten more fiscally conservative. I don't see any evidence that the headspace of this country, the headspace of progressives, is no, I am going to punish you if you go too far right wing. There's the group that would do that, the group that could do that, at least in theory, they are actually so on the mat. They are just so wrecked right now. Nobody has any interest of talking about the NDP. I think we've already established, not even sure they exist anymore. So no, I don't think he's going to lose the election for being too right wing, especially when your opponent is Pierre Poilievre.
Carter, same question to you to start us off with on the choices that Mark Carney faces on what I'd call week one of the election.
Well, I just pick up where Corey left off there. I mean, I think that Carney is trying to define himself differently, and the pickup from the NDP has been fantastic. I think he's also, with Corey, skipping over a little bit about the pickup that he's getting from the Conservatives as well. I mean, this was a 25-point gap, and now it is a tie game. Unless you're following the Ecos polls, in which case I think that I think the Liberals went over 100% with Ecos.
Yeah, I actually think the Conservatives owe them votes in the Ecos poll, right?
I think they do. I think the Conservatives have given up all of their votes, but there's also a tremendous number of votes coming off of the Conservatives. And what was the question, Zain?
The question is fundamentally, is Carney positioning himself as too conservative with the limited data we have in order to be successful this next election?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think that there is a zeitgeist in the province and in the world towards conservatism, and only Justin Trudeau was really standing against that in Canada. I mean, if you look, everybody's favorite premier right now is Doug Ford. Danielle Smith is getting stronger with her lunacy, not weaker. We can blame the left, but David Eby squeaked out a victory against a lunatic in British Columbia. I mean, this is a time of conservatism, and rational conservatism is going to be very, very popular.
Well, look, I do want to say I don't actually think that Mark Carney is a conservative. Right? I think he is such a classical liberal, a type that I didn't know existed in the Liberal Party of Canada until pretty recently. I thought that they'd all kind of been shaken out by Justin Trudeau, but he's not. He's not Pierre Poilievre. And to Stephen's point, about half of the gain that the Liberals have seen have come from the NDP and half from the Conservatives. So he's drawing pretty evenly from both sides, which makes me think his appeal is not about left or right. It's probably about competence, adultness, qualification. And that's not so bad for him. That's not bad at all.
Let's talk about, before we get into messaging and positioning and all the fun things we like to on the air war side of things, let's talk about a ground game aspect of this, Carter, heading into and starting into the first week. Candidate recruitment. Corey, there's a Hill Times piece today saying that Carney is reaching out to prominent, or his team by extension, to be fair, reaching out to prominent former Tories or prominent former New Democrats and others to consider being candidates. Do you like this for Team Carney? And then I want to spend a few minutes on what their ground game candidate recruitment challenge will be. Yet, of course, they've had some of the Trudeau-era folks say, I'm actually going to run again after saying no. The most prominent, of course, is Anita Anand, who found herself on cabinet again in a prominent role. But Corey, the branching out to folks that may have been previously of another party or may have not even indicated that they're liberal now and still might be part of that other party, New Democrat, NDP, New Democrat, Conservatives. You like that for Team Carney strategically, or find a lane, find your liberals, let's go?
I mean, I personally like it an awful lot. I like the idea that, especially in a moment of crisis, especially in a moment where we all need to pull together as a country, there's somebody trying to pull the country together, irrespective of what their stripe has been in the past. I do think we live in a pretty negative partisanship world, and the challenge becomes, are you just bringing a bunch of people that are going to give people a reason to be mad at you? So it remains to be seen, but I mean, I don't hate it. I have to assume they have some polling, they have some thinking, they have some focus grouping on maybe this being not such a bad contrast for them. We've talked about steady, stable, prime ministerial versus eating an apple in a t-shirt, Pierre Poilievre, right? Maybe that's a contrast they think works for them. Maybe they think hyper-partisan Pierre Poilievre versus non-partisan former public servant Mark Carney works for them. Maybe this is all working for them. Maybe there's a piece of paper somewhere, and in fact, their actions to date suspect there is, that says Mark Carney is qualified, stable, sensible government who is not going to get dug into the partisan fights of the past and is instead going to just put Canada first and a strong Canada as we build a better country, or whatever the hell the
version of that is. Sure.
Yeah, so I don't hate it, but I also think when there's reporting like that, you better hope that you actually have some of these names, or else it looks like you've just kind of fumbled.
I want to get into the part B of that question that you're leaning into. Carter, answer part A. Do you like it? And then let's start with part B, which is, how does Team Carney ensure this is successful? In a world in which most people don't even know the name of prominent cabinet ministers, how do they become successful in showcasing to the public that they're creating this multi-partisan, rainbow of people on the liberal side of things? Explain that to me. How does it punch through? That's like a very 2025 sort of word, but how does that kind of punch through to make an impact, or the desired impact that Team Carney would want? Should this be a dedicated strategy that they're pursuing?
It's interesting. I'm trying to figure out if I long for the day of the star candidate. The star candidate used to be something that I think we all remember. Christine Silverberg was approached by every party when she was the chief of police to be a candidate for them in their election. Yeah. And Rick Hansen wound up being a
chief, right?
Calgary police chief. Rick Hansen was another Calgary police chief who wound up being a candidate for Jason Kennedy. Not Jason Kennedy. Was it Jason Kennedy? Yeah. No, it was Jim Prentice. When Jim Prentice lost the government. These star candidates came forward, and you mentioned the name Andrew Leslie. We have these star candidates that are going to come forward. They're going to fill our cabinet and actually be successful. I'm not sure that matters anymore. I think that we've moved so much into leader-centric politics, and the cabinet is so anonymous with so little power that, if you recruit a star candidate, you're probably just recruiting someone who's going to be bitter in being in a cabinet position where they don't get to actually make any choices. So, going out and recruiting an NDP MLA or recruiting a former Liberal, Quebec Liberal premier who also ran for the Conservative leadership, it sounds good in paper, but you're also losing a lot of these people. You better be able to step up on Monday, Tuesday, and actually, deliver some of these folks, or you're going to look like you're chasing a dream that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm worried.
You
about
think there's
Zain,
enhanced risk there without the upside, so to speak? Like it's not like not like he's going to get Tom Mulcair to run for him, for example, right? Like that's a name that people would know. That's a name associated with one party, despite his Quebec Liberal past, right? He was the former. Like that's just I'm throwing that out there as a hypothetical, just to give you a sense of political height, right? Like in terms of that sort of name isn't going to show up. So how does this strategy work? I guess is my question.
Yeah. I mean, if he wanted a really difficult to work with NDP former leader, I mean, he could go to Nenshi. But this is impossible. Right? Like you're grabbing all these names and
I don't get it.
Impossible.
I don't understand that. What does that mean?
There's another problem, right?
You'll be fine.
And we talked a little bit about this on our Patreon one. Which, if you're willing to part for $6, you can go listen to
only
strategistpatreon.com.
$6 Canadian, right? It used to be American. We switched over. Okay.
It's never American.
Okay. If we switched over though. Let people know. People like the fact that we made a Canadian choice rather than it was default Canadian, Corey. So let people think it was American, and then we made the effort.
We made a choice.
Yeah, we made a choice to be like, no, we don't actually want.
Made a point.
We don't want the 30% premium. We're going to make it $6 Canadian.
Yeah, we want it to be Canadian.
Yeah, so
we love this country.
Yeah, okay.
We talked about, is Mark Carney making some of the same calculations that the Kamala Harris campaign made, and will those calculations result in the same disadvantageous outcome? I guess that's the most neutral way I can put it.
Yeah.
And this just reeks of the Democrats trotting Liz Cheney to fucking everything, right?
Yeah.
That didn't work because we live in a world of negative partisanship where it's not the minute she's talking in support of Kamala Harris, she's a traitor to the conservatives that you're after. And the Democrats that she's now in a party with, or at least she's not in a party with them, but she's supporting, they fucking hate her. And they're like, why would you do that? I'm mad. I'm not going to go door knock today because I'm mad Liz Cheney was on my TV saying nice things about Kamala Harris. And so we're not the United States. We're Canada. We do take a different approach to our politics. I'm not saying that you're destined to have the same outcomes, but it does make me wonder. And it does make me wonder if it's actually a strategy that has borne out recently anywhere in the world.
That's interesting. Not to belabor the point, because I think we're past it on this particular Carney strategy, but I do find there's two aspects of it to what I presented here, right? There's the multi-partisan aspect of it, going after people from different political stripes, which I think we've talked about. But the former, I think, is also as interesting, right? And when you're going with a cabinet that can be argued as being traditionalist or a throwback, do you think there's political value in finding people, regardless of actually their jersey color now, that have committed to public service, bringing them back, plucking them back in this very acute moment of crisis? Does that translate for you, either as an air war message or as something interesting or useful? Like left and right is one thing, front and back is one thing, and this is going back to go forward. Maybe I'm thinking too much about this, but there is something to be said here. Corey, you go first, and then Carter, who you seem to be confused, maybe because the oxygen level in your the oxygen level in your basement suite is rapidly running out. But yes, go ahead.
Yeah,
I am feeling a little lightheaded.
Yeah, well, don't worry, Carter. I'll go back, and then you can go forward.
Yeah. So you know what I mean, right? Yeah.
We'll go back to go.
I was very confused by that.
The obvious major difference with when Kamala Harris is doing it and when we're doing it right now is that people in Canada actually believe there's an existential crisis. Americans, that was quite a partisan divide, right? People thought that, if there was an existential crisis, they couldn't agree on what it was. They thought it was either Donald Trump or Kamala Harris. And so it was hard to create a rally to the flag moment, at least in a way that was actually going to give you the political dividends that you wanted. But here in Canada, we're actually pretty fucking concerned about what's going on with the United States and all of that. And so maybe there is an opportunity to bring people together from across the board and say, no, in times of crisis, we pull together. We have had coalition governments during wars, right, where we've brought people together. And maybe this is something that starts to feel like a moment where that's appropriate. I have seen some polling that suggests amongst liberals, it would actually be very popular to have a united coalition of, well, we're just going to get everybody involved, the best minds of all. We're going to put aside all of this partisan bickering. And so maybe that reporting doesn't hurt so much as long as you can somewhat follow through with it. I'll go back to that point there. But that's the challenge he's got. He hasn't delivered on it yet. We got in that Hill Times piece no names except for Lee Richardson, who was a former Conservative MP in Calgary.
Yeah, who said no?
Who said no? So, like, and that he's supporting the Conservatives. So, like, we've got to get more than that if we're going to think this strategy is going to bear any fruit.
Carter, how does Carney launch again? He just launched. How does he launch again? If you were advising him, what would you do? What would you do different from the launch that you had? If you were to launch, would you include some candidates? Would you have the time to build slogan? Would you completely take anything that happened during the leadership and scratch that and you're starting net new? Give me how you're thinking about this. Do you even need to launch again? He's already prime minister. Let's go. How are you thinking about this, Corey? Same question to you as we discuss what I'd like to call, like, you know, the first week or the first starting days for the Carney campaign.
Campaign started in February. Just keep going. Just keep going. Don't relaunch again. Just keep running. Make it look like one long campaign, and don't give people the time to think about whether or not why they like you. Just understand that they do like you, and that's what Mark Carney should be doubling down on right now.
Corey,
people like him? Don't go crazy.
Do you agree with that premise, Corey? And if so, this is very much a Hill and Knowlton thing for you and I, which is Carter is giving the strategic directive, and we have to now make this real because he's given very little direction to us otherwise. Because if you agree with that premise, what does a brand look like? What does all these sort of things look like? Do you borrow it from the previous one? How are you thinking about these things? I want to get a bit deeper than what Carter's put on the table here.
Yeah, I don't agree. I think that you still need to have a launch.
That fucks my premise up. Fuck. Okay, fine. Yeah, go ahead. Talk about it.
I don't, because I think that, well, Canadians are pretty keyed in on politics right now. I don't think they were sleepwalking through the Liberal race. I do think that there is a whole group of people who are not going to pay attention until there's an election. The number of conversations I've had with people in my life, smart people, not idiots, who have said, so, when do you think the election's going to be? And I want to say we've all fucking known forever it's going to be next week at the latest, right? But they don't know that. They don't know that. And so you've got to accept the moment for what it is. You've got to accept the electorate for who they are. And they're going to turn their eyes to all of the main candidates as soon as elections start and say, oh, I guess I better pick somebody. So you got to use that moment. I don't think the launch needs to look like it's the first time anybody's thought about an election. I think you can use the power of the pulpit to go out and say, I've just told the Governor General we need an election. We all know it's coming. We all know this moment's too serious to wait a couple of weeks to see if Parliament can work or not. I want to make a new Parliament work. I need a mandate to go, fight mano a mano with Donald Trump, whatever it is, right? And so the launch can look less about, let me introduce you to me, Mark Carney, and more, I, your Prime Minister, have made a decision. This is in the best interest of the country. And that's when you pull in your brand attributes in your story.
Are those brand attributes new, or are they borrowed from the leadership, Corey?
I think that you would have been a very, very poor political organizer if you weren't keeping one eye on the general election through the leadership. So the answer is both. It's new and it's carried through from it. It's just making the focus a little bit different for the audience, but none of the words are new. The emphasis is just in different places.
No, but there has to be some different words. Like, for example, it can't be Team Carney on the signs, right? It's been Team Trudeau on all the signs.
Yeah, I agree.
It should be, I think Canada. It should be a Mark Carney liberal, right? I'm a Mark Carney liberal, right? Really define that Mark Carney's a different type of liberal. George Chahal, a Mark Carney liberal.
Is he though? Is he though?
Oh,
we should probably can we get him on the phone?
That was a bad example. I made a bad thing happen there. Damn it.
Carter, are you okay?
Carter, yeah, Carter. Have you passed? Is this like a ghost where you have passed away? And we are.
Can you hear the sirens?
Yes, we can hear the siren. Yeah, we can hear the sirens.
All night, every night. This is what happens.
Where are they putting you up and then ultimately killing you?
There's a TV.
Okay.
It's not all bad.
All right, that's good.
Okay, Corey, any other choices you want Mark Carney to make on week 1? Because my over-under is really only one question, and I want to get to it. Any choices that you have been thinking about that you're like, Carney, do this week 1?
He's moved to Canada Strong away from the It's Time to Build that he launched with. I think that's a bit of a shame. I actually preferred It's Time to Build. I can again
Me
understand.
too. I don't like Canada
I
Strong
can
at all.
understand the thinking. I just don't like it. And if it were me in the first week, you've got to do it in a way that it doesn't look like insanely presumptuous, but you've got to come out as the man with the plan, right? You haven't said very much about policy. I actually don't know that Canadians care that much about policy right now. I know that there's going to be some concern about giving a target-rich environment, but if there were ever a moment in this sea of sound bites for a 93 style Red Book, I think this is kind of it. And I wouldn't spend any time talking about it so much as to say, I got a plan. I want a mandate for the plan. Here are my 3 focuses are, we're going to build east to west infrastructure. We're going to pull down all of these barriers, all of that crap that we always say, which is always harder than it is, the way we talk about it. But yeah, I think you keep the agenda moving to your song. And you also know that you're going to have Donald Trump blow up your campaign 10 different ways. So you start by getting all of that stuff out so that nobody can say you're a lightweight. And then you spend the rest of the campaign as the man with the plan who's going to fight Donald Trump. And then you react and you pick up the Donald Trump pieces and you hit Pierre Poilievre with them. And you just let Pierre Poilievre's 35 days in his wish journal campaign that he always wanted to run get utterly fucked up. And you just do everything you need to do week 1. And you spend the rest of the weeks, improv. I think that's what you do.
Carter, well, what's an idea or a thought you have in your head that you hope and wish and dream as a young lad that Mark Carney would do on the first week of his campaign?
Yeah?
Sounds good. That's a great idea. Probably one of your best, Carter. Great.
I think you should send out an email asking if people want to sign. And if they do...
I've got nothing. We're going to leave it there. That's good. I don't even go into the over-under. It should probably take a whole episode. We're going to leave it there. That's a wrap on episode 1852 of The Strategist. My name is Zain Velji. With me, as always, Corey Hogan, Stephen Carter, and we shall see you all next time.